Welcome to Strength Chat with your host, that's right, himself, myself. As usual, the mad scientist of strength. To my left, the wizard of training, Mr. Brandon Sen, who, as of yesterday, did, if you haven't listened to the last podcast, was missing an update on his training to me, but now I know what I'm supposed to do for the week.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
Squatting with turkeys. So, anyway.
Let's see what that means.
That might not be actually what's written in the training program, but it is Thanksgiving week.
That's how you're translating.
And I'm squatting the day before Thanksgiving, so I'm reading that into that somehow. And as usual, our mature athlete and coach, Dr. Rudolph, beside us as well. So normally we start out the show with a little funny story or updates on things going around here, but I think we're gonna drop that to our guest today. So to get us off, and so I guess that means I got to do the intro first. So really, welcome to the show, Rachel Balkovec. Or Balkovec. Yeah, maybe we can jump into that whole story.
We're all still learning.
Messed up the
Rachel B.
Yeah, Rachel B. That's
so.
Good. We'll do that.
Rachel is kind of popping up in the headlines right now. So she is just taken a new position with, one of the teams that we really like, which is, actually most of the teams
because
in MLB, because they're a big customer. With the New York Yankees as the very first full-time female hitting coach. So really congratulations on the move.
Not just for the Yankees, but in Major League Sports.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, sorry, I didn't clarify that.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So welcome to the show.
Thank you. This is truly an honor, and I respect all three of you, and also just what you guys are doing in the space is just really amazing. So I'm definitely happy to be a part of this conversation.
All right. Well, like I said, I'm really happy to have you on. One of the things I really like is, kind of different looks at things. And why I was excited to have you on is I think you bring a lot of purposeful diversity. And I'm talking about that, you're academically, you've sought a lot of different education on, from a philosophy standpoint. You see it in your work history, although you do continue to pick teams to work for that are all Kabuki Strength customers. So again, highly keep that up. All right. So
that's why I'm actually Kabuki. No, sorry.
And then mix in a lot of travel and living in different places around the world, which again I think helps with kind of that different viewpoint and take on things. And hopefully maybe we can dive into your some of the concepts from your recent Exos piece as well, where you were with yet again another Kabuki individual, Craig Liebenson, who's on our advisory board. So a lot of touch points, Rachel. So, but now you need to open with a funny story for us. So yeah.
So I just told this one, and I kind of forgot about it, and I just told this one at a conference, and I just think it's just hilarious. So as I'm entering another phase of my career, I'm just kind of reflecting back on when I first got into professional baseball, and I was hired by the Cardinals in 2014 as a full-time strength and conditioning coach. I was their strength and conditioning coordinator, in fact. And I was the first ever woman to be hired as a strength coach, I think in all professional sports, definitely in baseball. And so the first time I was actually to address a group of athletes in that position, it was pitchers and catchers report to spring training. So there's about 60 pitchers and catchers and about 30 staff members. And it's a group of about 100 men, okay? And listeners may or may not know there's a high percentage of Latin American players in professional baseball. And so I was going to address them in both English and Spanish, which is something that I was proud of for teaching myself Spanish, and also just it's important for the job. And I was it was my first day on the job, first day addressing people. And I was I'm going to do this in Spanish too. And I'm just going to, mic drop, I'm going to impress these people,
Yep.
I'm a girl, I know all eyes are on me, so I'm just going to do it in English and Spanish. So what I was to say to these guys when it was my turn to like talk was to let them know what we were going to do for the day, which was after they got done with their throwing on the field, they were going to go to the weight room and do some of the strength tests, intake strength tests for spring training. So the time came and I just announced to everyone in English, I said, okay, hey guys, when you're done throwing, go ahead and go right into the weight room and we'll do your strength testing. And then in Spanish, I said, después de tirando, tú vas a ir al gimnasio y tú vas a hacer tu prueba de fuerza, which I thought meant the same thing. So after I got done talking and everyone kind of went up to their space, I was picking up the cones and stuff. And one of the staff members, I like looked up, one of the staff members who I actually had known for a couple of years was coming at me like at an alarming rate, like fast. He was like walking up to me and I'm like, I immediately was like, oh my God, like what did I say? You know, and he's like, Rachel, he's like kind of doing this thing. He's like, Rachel, you know, there's two words that mean throw. That's tirar and lanzar. And you said, use the word tirar. And I was like, yeah, okay, so we're good. And he's like, but also like, tirar is slang for having sex. And so,
Oh God.
So to recap, what I actually said to this group of 100 men and about, like I would say 50 to 60 Latin players was, guys, after you get done having sex, you're going to go to the weight room. Like, you know, if you think about it, it just doesn't make any sense. Like they feel tired and, you know, so it just was silly. But I just learned, you know, that I should use the word lanzar when I'm saying to throw. So good learning experience, but also freaking hilarious. And I just was reflecting on that.
You're still wearing that one. That's great.
Oh,
That was actually really
So
funny.
That is definitely better than any story that we have for the day. So yeah.
So was Pete Prenzi there with the Cardinals when you were there?
Yeah, he is like my dad. He's honestly, if it wasn't for Pete, I wouldn't be here. Hands down, 100%. He took like the chance in hiring me and totally took me under his wing when I was there and like supported me. So, and I know he's a big Kabuki fan. So,
Well, it's a funny story. Well,
I got a funny Pete Prenzi story. So,
gosh.
yeah.
he's
So,
nodding. It's probably going to tell the same story.
Probably.
yeah. So this is like I was Kabuki's first employee, right? And so you know we outsourced a little bit of the manufacturing at the start, and you know started building the company, and so I kind of did a little bit of everything. And by the time, we had a couple employees, you know, like by the time that we were about 3 months in business, really, when we sold our first shoulder rock into MLB. And it was to Pete Prenzi.
Yeah.
It was our very first purchase of it within MLB. And so I get this email, and I'm not the best at like responding or reading things like necessarily always correctly and
Talking with people.
yeah. It's, you know,
And you're a lot worse in Spanish.
yeah. So anyway, I'm sitting there at my computer and I get this email and it's kind of like, hey, I didn't get the video or something like this, and I'm just and I'm sitting there typing up a response like, you know, kind of like, who do you think you are? Blah blah blah. It's right here. Blah, blah, blah. And our one of our employees walks up behind me and he's like, you know, that's the head strength coach for the Cardinals. You might want to rephrase what you're saying there. And I'm like, at that time, I was like, yeah, I think we need to get like a customer service person that is actually a little better. I'm like, we're just going to delete everything that I said here.
He is the most humble guy, and I remember him being like, what do you think about this shoulder rock? I remember him getting it, and also, he just like, he's such a humble, like he wouldn't have cared at all. Like he doesn't care about his title, and he's just like such a great guy. I owe him everything. He's actually, you know, of all people, he's the one, he sent me a podcast about you, Chris, and that's how I found out that you were weird. And I was like, that's a cool guy. Like, listen to this podcast. It was like something about you. I don't know. You were like killing beavers with your bare hands or something. And I was like, what? So yeah, that's how I first ever even heard about Kabuki, was through Pete. And he's just, I can't say enough about him. Awesome.
Yeah, he's a great guy. He gave us the idea for what we call the tactical shoulder rock now, because he said he wanted to be able to take this on the road, throw him in the bus, and, you know, could we come up with a case for carrying it? We actually created a breakdown one so that it fits in a nice little case. So it's our That's our Pete Prinze.
But yeah, that was the
autographed
Pete Prinze special.
He was the inspiration for the tactical shoulder rock.
He must know. I hope he knows that.
He
That's
does
awesome.
know that.
Yeah.
He does.
Yeah, he's great.
So let's talk about kind of that purposeful activity that you've done with your life, and you can see it again just with your recent move. Like most people either live in the strength and conditioning side of the sport and they stay there, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's an incredible, but now you're making a transition. Although in the interim you've been doing basically a little bit of R&D, continuing at research side of stuff, and now you're switching over to being a hitting coach, and again kind of tying that back into some of the other stuff that we talked about in the intro, is that this purposeful exploring different disciplines and philosophies. And how did you end up on this path, and kind of where has it taken us besides the things that I've spoken to that I'm not aware of, that you can share with our audience?
Oh my God.
That was a whole lot of open-ended, I know. So
yeah. So how, in my career, how did I get to, I guess, I'm a product of my environment. I'm a product of my mentors, and I really draw from people that. Chris Frankel is one of my original mentors in the game, he flies really under the radar. He's the director of human performance for TRX, and he was one of the first guys. He was a professor of mine in New Mexico, of all things. He was the first person to teach me about training. Really, I played college sports, but he gave me my coaching philosophy of sorts, and it was just very well rounded. He understood aerobic capacity, he understood strength, he understood team sports, he understood strength sports. He just had a breadth of knowledge, and he always encouraged me to be that way and not just be a guru in one area. And then also, I went to Athletes Performance to do my first ever, or Exos now, to do my first ever internship. And they were the same way. They talked about movement, but they also talked about being strong. And they talked about breathing. And this is 2009, before breathing was cool. And no one was breathing.
No one was talking about it then, and nobody was.
And how did they live so long?
That's a good question.
How did it be before 2015? I don't know. So, they were talking about those things, and I was so fortunate to have those early mentors that just said, don't be a guru, learn and understand different perspectives. And even in life, just being around people that are moving and taking different jobs. Chris was a professor at University of New Mexico and took a leap and went up to San Francisco when TRX was nothing. And now they're huge, so he took those leaps, and I learned from him. And then people like Kelly Starrett, who's a mentor of mine, and same thing, he's yoked and he lifts, but he's also very good and very, his eye for movement is just incredible. And so being on both ends of the spectrum from a coaching perspective. And then also just I think something that I've always, since I was a young kid, it's kind of where I'm from, Omaha, Nebraska, and my parents are so awesome, which I would like to talk about. But from a very young age, I just wanted to get out. I wanted to get out of Omaha, and I wanted to explore. So I went to New Mexico for school. My freshman year of college, I had super performance anxiety in softball, and I decided to transfer, got recruited to go to New Mexico. And literally the first couple of things I looked up were how far away it was from Omaha, which was almost 1,000 miles. Number one. I looked at the diversity of the school, and I looked the breakdown of the school, and it was something 50% Mexican, 25% Native, 25% Caucasian. And I was I'm in. I was diversity, give it to me. Omaha's very, it's
homogenous,
not diverse.
Yeah.
Midwest city. And so I was diversity. What? I loved the Southwest culture and just the Mexican people there and just how they interacted. And I was waitress. That's where I first learned to speak some Spanish, was waitressing there and learning with the cooks and learning from them. And so I just was any kind of different perspective, different type of human being. I've always been very fascinated by that. And that's just I think sometimes you do things by accident, and then it leads to you being ooh, I like that. Now I'm going to decide to do that. So just like I moved for college, I moved to get my first master's degree at LSU to Baton Rouge. I kind of was moving around, and finally I just like I got rid of my TVs, I got rid of my stuff. I can fit everything in my car now, and I just like I don't need attachment to any home, anything, any place, nothing. I just consider myself like honestly a nomadic human being, and I want to take every opportunity I can to learn as wide as I can, I guess.
Didn't you end up in Amsterdam for biomechanics as well? So
yeah. So my last for the last year, I was living in Amsterdam most of 2018, 19. But yeah, by now it's like I just move anywhere. You know, it's not even a big deal anymore, and I thrive off of opportunities to get different perspectives, even though I didn't really. I didn't really enjoy Amsterdam that much as a place. However, now I know. I've lived a year in Europe. Everything that came with that, I was able to travel a little bit and see some things. So, yeah.
Let's dive into that statement that you said. Don't be a guru a little bit deeper. What does that mean to you? Both sides of the coin, the good, the bad of it. I know you kind of extrapolated a little bit of that in that last answer, but I think that there's a little bit more there.
I think there's like a couple ways to go about being successful, and it depends on your goals. Actually, sometimes like being a guru would be actually very, really good. Like if you only want to do one thing for the rest of your life, or if what you're doing only requires you to do that one thing. So, actually, in your sport, it's like, no, actually being a guru could be a good thing. However, no, I take that back. I still don't believe, don't be a guru. I still don't believe that, because if you put yourself in a corner, you limit yourself from getting another perspective that might actually help you in that corner. So even if you're constantly focusing on squatting, and you never take time to like learn a different perspective, you might be missing out on something that could actually help you in that exact thing that you want to be good at. So don't be a guru to me is like, you could be really good at one thing, but that makes you very fragile. And actually, oh my God, by the way, does your shirt say anti-fragile? Because I love it.
Not today's. Are you wearing an anti-fragile? Okay, yeah.
She's pointing to me.
Okay. No.
Sorry,
It's not all about you.
Oh, whatever. Yes, it is.
Get it. It's about you. No. Anti-fragile. Like that's the idea behind that book. And Nassim Taleb is just like, and I'm going to like butcher this definition, but to be fragile is like one thing goes wrong and you break. But to be anti-fragile is like, or to be resilient, I think is the middle ground where, okay, bad things can happen to you and you don't break. But actually the anti-fragile, like the elite level of like human capacity is bad things happen and you actually benefit from those things. So I think like the more robust you can be as a human being in every area just makes you more anti-fragile and more able to grow in experiences that would normally just crush your average human, Yep. So yeah, that's like, don't be a guru. It should just say like, be anti-fragile, seek anti-fragility, where you're able to actually like thrive in an environment where there are many diverse challenges coming at you because you've chosen to have some experience that is different than just the area that you're in,
Well, and we can take this beyond just the physical nature of anti-fragile as well, because speaking of career and things like that, there's so much risk that comes involved with defining yourself by this one thing, and that's what I really love. Like even your Instagram says this isn't about baseball, right? And you never know what's going to happen that could pull you away from that. So like if I define myself as just a power lifter and I had something traumatic happen that takes that away from me, I've taken away my whole what I stand on in life versus, like I've had this conversation with a lot of people talking about like my future plans over the next few years and like moving away from this heavy, and they're like, you're not going to do that, you're not going to stick with that, you'll always fall back. I'm like, no, I have a lot of other things in life that balance that I enjoy and that are a big part. Like it's not the only thing, but there's a huge risk in like your job, your life, all these things when you identify as like you reach that group, like, this is what I am. I am the foot person, or the blah, whatever it is. And there's a lot of risk, because at any time things can be taken away from you. So
there's a number in both my Twitter and Instagram profiles. It says this is not about baseball, and then
I saw the number. Yeah. What is that?
It's like a reminder to myself too, because I like hate social media, but it's a necessary evil, and it is important. There's so many great things about it. But I basically, like, probably a year ago, or I don't know when I changed that, but I just, like, it's like stripping away of the identities that we give ourselves. And so I'm not, like, in many people's profile, and this is like normal, so I'm sure it's like in your profiles too, but it's like, oh, this is my job title, these are the letters after my name, this is what I do, just like, in my social media account, I stripped away the identities. I don't have anything on there about who I've worked for or what I've done, because, like, that's not who I am. It's not what my life is about. And if I choose to leave it, identity crisis is a real thing, especially in athletics. I know I'm telling you guys what you already know, but how many people have you seen leave the sport of powerlifting, and they fall apart because they put their entire identity into this one thing? And for some people, that's a sport. Some people, that's their job. Sometimes it's a family. Sometimes it's your looks. Could be anything. So I think attaching yourself to any one identity is very dangerous. The numbers in that is actually from Man's Search for Meaning, and it's the numbers that were burned on Viktor Frankl's arm. And I just was so struck by the way that he talked about when they arrived to the concentration camp, that he talks about being stripped of every single identity. Literally, like, you're no longer, he was a doctor, of course. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but he's a doctor. And so you go to this concentration camp, and all of a sudden, like, in your real life, he was a doctor, he's accomplished, he had a wedding ring, he has a family, he has all these identities in his life, and they went to the concentration camp and literally were stripped of their clothing and, like, put it in their hair, everything. They literally are stripped of every single identity they've ever had in their life and, like, put in with everybody else. And so it just struck me. He talks about, like, losing your identity, and then who are you really without all those identities that you've put on yourself and that you've accepted from other people. And we see that all the time. And sport is like a very strong.
I was gonna say, well, one, that's incredibly powerful. So thank you for sharing that, and I'm really glad I asked the question about your Instagram profile now, because that's really powerful, Rachel. And I was just gonna say, like, can you tell us about what you see similar to that in professional sports? Because we're not in it every day. We're in these clubhouses. We work, on the outskirts all the time. So I have a sense of it in talking to the coaches and all this other stuff. But, like, you've got somebody that is, so much like such a big figure doing this, and they may be breaking themselves too at the same point. And by the time that they're done, what is that path forward? How does that affect people? And especially now, if you also, like, you may not be in great shape. You may have a lot of damage, and what are you going to do? See, do you see that as a whole, and what,
Oh, gosh. I have this conversation with young guys all the time where they're so scared, and they're scared because they have attached themselves to one identity, which is baseball. And that's another, like, you cling to that because you subconsciously know, if I lose this, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. I have no idea who I really am. I put my worth in my batting average. And so if I lose this, if I get released or if I get hurt or whatever, like, they know. It's like this really deep feeling of just, like, I just got the chills thinking about it, because I see these young men, and it's our fault as coaches, as organizations, as teams, as sport in general. We need to do a better job of, like, preparing these people for life after sports, and like lifting them up by giving them another source of worth. For example, helping somebody get their degree, because a lot of these guys get drafted and they haven't finished their college degree. Help them get their degree, help them find internships, help them just, like, read, just help them continue to develop their mind as a human being, and maybe even to develop some worth outside of baseball, so that there's not so much pressure on clinging to that and being successful in that one identity, like, all the time. And then, I mean, I actually, I went through it myself. as a college athlete where I came into college wanting to play professional softball, and I probably could have. Like, I was athletically very good. And I actually this like much longer story that I care to tell on this podcast, but I developed like the worst case of yips I've ever seen. I couldn't throw the ball back to the pitcher within like 6 months of getting to college as a freshman. And like, I had put my entire identity in softball. I wanted to play professionally. I wanted to play on the Olympic team. I was very good at it. And I'm telling a story that you guys have seen, I'm sure, where I crumbled. I went through a massive depression. I was crying every day for no reason. I thought everyone hated me. I crumbled from this very confident young woman to like nothing in about 9 months because I lost the talent that I had put my worth in.
Now, I appreciate you sharing that firsthand experience, because that's exactly one it's really challenging. But some people haven't faced that, and they don't know just how big that can be when you have all your hopes and dreams pinned on something, and you don't have a whole lot else in your life, and it's ripped out from under you. And
So creating diverse interest is really self-preservation, and trying to prevent that total loss, potentially. I'm sure you've been on other podcasts, and I know you host a podcast too that I want to chat a little bit about. But I'm interested to know a little bit more about Theta Wave, and if that's been a part of your transition from being a strength coach to a hitting coach. I know you're up at Driveline, and how in the world? I mean, there's the obvious question is, what's it like, being of your gender in a male sport, surrounded by 100 men in your first experience, but the strength is strength. Hitting coach, taking that next step to a position coach, it's a huge transition. How did that happen, and how did the mind play? And does the whole flow part of what you talk about on your podcast, did that play into it?
My whole life is dedicated to I wouldn't say my whole life is dedicated to being in the flow state as much as possible. That's not true, because that's not what, if we were in the flow state all the time, that it wouldn't be the flow state, Yeah,
Yeah.
But I would say, like, I'm very much into like law of attraction, visualization. I mean, when you talk about something like this happen, I know this sounds weird, and it's pretty fresh. So this is the first interview or podcast I've done since the news broke, but like, I've been envisioning this for decades. And again, it's hard to put into words. Like, I mean, literally for decades. When I was in fourth grade, we did the assignment, like, what do you want to be when you grow up assignment? And I actually said I wanted to be the first female NFL place kicker.
Why not? Right.
I don't know, but the thing is, like, the very important thing about that is, I didn't say, I want to play in the NFL. I said, I want to be the first female. I don't know where that came from. I was like 10. And I've always had this like very foundational feeling of like empowering women. And I've always been the leader on the team, like since I was 12, like just very, very young. I have envisioned being interviewed about something like this. I have this thought has been in my mind for decades, in some form or not this exact thing, but in some form or another. It's the
same framework. Yeah.
So that like the flow state, the like energy, law of attraction, these things are all things that I'm like very into, I guess you could say, or just that I subscribe to. And that's like the premise of the podcast that I run, which, by the way, my podcast is very much a hobby. I love just hearing people's stories and sharing them. So if you haven't heard of it out there, don't feel bad. But yeah, it's just, I love to connect with people who are also like just doing things that are just, you just hear what they're doing and you're like, how is that possible? Tell us about your upbringing and your thoughts and the philosophies that you subscribe to that have gotten you, not the physical side, but like the mental processes that you have that have allowed you to function at this very high level in whatever you do. So that's the premise behind the Theta Wave podcast. Theta Wave is the brainwave associated with the flow state for the listeners who don't know. So yeah, it's everything that I do all the time. It's why I travel. It's why I try to seek like anonymity where I'm in very remote places and no one knows about baseball and no one speaks English. And like, who are you when you strip away those identities? You like talk about getting in the flow state or like being who you are, who you really, really are, is like going to Laos and going to an extremely remote village where that's not on Google Maps, where literally no one even speaks English is an identity. English is an identity. Being an American is identity. And so going to this place where they had never even heard of baseball. Never. Could you imagine? So talk about like, that was right after the Astros won the World Series. So like I had a World Series ring with my last name on it and no one even had heard of baseball, you know? So seeking out those opportunities that really just warp your mind and take you so far away from like those identities, your life, just really puts you in a different mental space. And I would say, that's what I seek. I don't seek the flow state. I seek something that's going to really bring me to the fringes of like my mental capacity.
You know, W. Clement Stone, I think has said it, and people have been talking about this mental state and calling it different things for years, higher power or whatever. But he said, whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. And so, at some point in the last maybe 6 months or a year or last 6 years, you said, I want to be the first female hitting coach in the major leagues. Did that actually go through your mind?
Yeah, I have 2 pieces of paper on my wall that I put up in Amsterdam and that I would imagine, put up everywhere I go for the rest of my life. But because when I moved to Amsterdam, it was like rough times. Like I decided to quit my job with the Houston Astros and move to Europe. Like that right there. You know, it's just like a tough decision.
Okay, I'm a World Series champion. I got a World Series ring with my name on it. I think I'll try something else.
Yeah, basically. And it was extremely difficult to get into the program. It was just like a process. I moved to Europe. I didn't have a car, rode a bike in the rain all the time in Amsterdam. It just was like massive, just different. And that was, I just like questioned myself, right? Like everyone told me not to do that, by the way. So,
of course.
like a lot of people that I consider close, even mentors, so some people did, but a lot of people that like didn't know me very well told me not to do that. They're like, why are you going to, there's no baseball in Europe. Why would you ever go there? Why would you do that type of thing? And so you question yourself. Like so many times I was like, am I doing the right thing? As I'm in Amsterdam, like no one even knows what the hell baseball is. And so I just like put 2 things on my wall. One says, one piece of paper is just like a notebook piece of paper. It says be a GM, which is like my long-term end goal. And then the other one is a quote from Buckminster Fuller. And I hope I don't butcher this, but basically it says, what is my job on the planet? What is it that I know something about that if I don't do, it won't get done? And I just kept looking at those things every day and like how, thinking about how I can make my next move and knowing that I was leaving strength and conditioning. But like what ended up happening and to get to your question is I moved to Amsterdam because the program there's like an extremely heavy focus on visual tracking, not visual training, visual tracking. So eye tracking for hitters. It's actually cricket because the guy's from Australia. But and I was introduced to eye tracking and the concept of that by the guy who hired me with the Yankees just now. His name is Dylan Lawson. He was a mentor of mine with the Astros. So I heard about eye tracking like 3 years ago, and he was already doing it before that for like 3 years, which, by the way, no one is doing that. So he's like a super visionary. He told me about it. I was looking into programs. I found a program in Amsterdam where this guy was, and I said, okay, I'm going to go there. Also, I knew that I was going to have an opportunity. I knew I was going to be transitioning out of strength and conditioning. I knew I would have an opportunity to work with the Netherlands national baseball and softball team as a hitting coach. So people had no idea why I was doing that, but ultimately all along it was a chess move because I knew it was going to allow me to have access to one of the best researchers in the world in eye tracking for hitters, and also that I was going to be able to start honing my skills as a hitting coach, where I probably wouldn't have many opportunities to do that in the States. So anyway, all that to say, I moved there, basically started crossing over into like this kind of hitting realm, which, by the way, like, I've swung a bat a million times in my life. It's not like I don't know anything about hitting. And also the human body is the human body and coaching is coaching. Yep. So I'm just teaching somebody to do a different skill. So I have 10 years of coaching experience, and like, it's not as big of a jump for me. I don't view it as big of a jump as maybe the whole world views it, but that's.
But to make the transition, you've got to. Other people have to see that. Yeah.
Yes, they have to know that I've been doing.
You can know it all along, but.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, all this to say, so Dylan Lawson, the guy who introduced me to gaze tracking and who hired me with the Yankees just recently, he knew I was over there with this. I mean, he knew all about this guy that I was going to be working with and around. And he knew that I was over there working with hitters. And he was like, you know, basically at some point said, well, what if you were a hitting coach for us? And I'm telling you, probably like in that moment or right after we got off the phone, I started envisioning myself in pinstripes.
Really?
That's awesome. Like, and you've got to do that.
I saw like two very strong visions of me like walking around the field in a Yankees uniform, and then like seeing the jersey hanging in my locker with Balkovec on it, like all the time. I would just think about that, and so, I mean, but that's something I practice regularly. You know, it's just like visualization is something I practice pretty much with everything, and if I think about it more often, then my thoughts go to that. Then my thoughts go to what do I need to do to get to that? And it's a driver. You know, if I'm envisioning that, it's like, okay, that's a reminder. Why am I doing this? Why am I biking in pouring rain and 35-degree weather in Amsterdam to my school 30 minutes away? Why am I doing this? Okay, yeah, there's my vision. It's in my head. It's so strong that it's like the reminder that this is why I'm doing this.
So, 30 some years ago, I was a college football coach and got a doctorate degree in psychological kinesiology, and we used a lot of visioning and visualization. And I worked with my position players to utilize that to practice for the 21 hours a day that they weren't on the practice field. Have you used visualization? Are you using visualization with your players? Do you plan to use it as a supplement to your hitting instruction?
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
And that is actually something that you just said is like triggered. I forgot at a young age too. Our coaches were talking. I don't say lucky very often, but I did get very lucky to have like really excellent youth coaches. Because I didn't earn them. Like, I don't know. I crossed paths with these amazing youth and high school coaches who did visualization with us. So that was something as a young softball player that I was really aware of. You know, it's just like a part of our training. So yeah, 100%. That's important.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Our past, I think, 3 podcasts now have all had very diverse individuals on it, from Mike Robertson, Nick Peterson most recently, and now Rachel B. And they've all kind of come back around to discussions around identity. And because we've talked with people who are all super excellers in their individual field, and it seems like at some point you might have to reach the mountaintop, so to say, to find that. But everyone that we've talked with, and I know we share these similar qualities as a company, but coming back to having a greater identity beyond that, I find myself kind of feeling bad because you guys are doing all the talking, but I've been doing a lot of reflecting as you guys are discussing this about some of our previous discussions around identity, and it's something that I most recently went through with lifting and not taking it as seriously as I once did, and kind of finding other things that make me happy right now. So. Anyway, continue. I'll continue listening. I'd feel bad if I didn't say anything the whole time.
Thanks for participating, Brad.
You're welcome.
But wait a minute. Since while we're
oh, go ahead.
Well, I should have taken this at the start of the show, but did you set a date yet for the wedding?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what you've been thinking about?
Well, I've had to think about the entire next year and planning everything. So
Okay,
yes, that
so
was a
we
big
have a
part of
date
it.
set now. So
Yeah.
are we gonna have a reveal party?
Wait,
or
where
what?
did this come from?
This is what you've been planning. You obviously haven't been training. You've been.
I have many other things going on.
6.5 or 7 years to pick a date.
Yeah, I'm someone who. What? Where did that even come from?
Wow.
Right out of the side. Just
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm trying to now connect the dots, and then I'm like, yes, New Year's Eve.
It takes him a
2020.
long time to visualize. New Year's
does.
Eve 2020.
I like to know all of the specifics.
Visualizing. Write the date on the wall so you don't.
All right.
I'll try not to forget.
What were you going to say there, Rachel?
You said something really important. You said, "Oh, well, all three of these people who have been like at elite levels of their field," or I can't remember what words you just used, but I actually think I've given this a lot of thought. Is like actually, I think what it takes is being in the depths of hell, not being at the elite level, but like that's not why someone is great. I think someone is great at whatever they do because they've had an experience where they've been in the depths of hell and had to figure their way out. And if you do figure your way out, you're going to be great. And so the more you can do that in many ways, like sometimes that can be as simple as you do a workout and you feel like you're going to die. You know, like you bring yourself to the depths of hell in a workout, right? That can be a very simple thing that's commonly understood. It can also be you bring yourself to the depths of hell of like I shared with you guys that I went through like a depression and was just like absolutely at a very low point in my life. And that now I'm able to like reflect on that and I've grown from it and it's catapulted me, honestly. I've also had a point like that in my career where I was like in the depths, like wanted to quit and just be an insurance salesman and like just, I've had that point and crawled out of that. And so the more times you can you can challenge yourself so much that you bring yourself to like the line or over the line and then come back from it and come out of it. And like in a more literal sense, I want to share this so much. It's so great. I like the New York Times story like broke on Friday, and then I'm getting all these emails. Like an email from like NBC News. Got an email from NBC News, and then like the next email in my inbox, and I have no shame in sharing this. The next email in my inbox was like an email from like my credit card company that was like you're getting close. You're getting close to your credit limit. Like, so just to give you an idea of like. This past year and like quitting with the Astros, going to Europe, I depleted my entire life savings to go back to college in Europe at the age of 31. And I've like maxed out my credit card. And then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, because it's not, but like I'm catapulted in my career, catapulted into the stratosphere because I took myself to the depths of hell and like made it out. And it was a good decision. And all of these things are happening. But it's like you have to get to the dark place, actually, to get to that elite level of thinking.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree. And, I'm just going to throw out some things that I've covered a million times. Probably it's covered in my book because you're speaking to like a key philosophy point that I have in there. And it's around chasing fear, the practice of like living in fear, the practice of once you've found comfort, you need to move. Like if something hasn't come at you, you need to go find the thing that scares you and chase that, because otherwise you're not in the practice. You are not developing. We know this in strength training. Like what happens when we quit training? We atrophy. The same thing happens with resilience and everything else as well. And so this society that we're in that pushes us to find comfort, to find ease, to find these things is taking resilience away from us. And then in athletics, you see this all the time, that gifted athlete that's never had the struggle. And everybody's like, oh my God, they're going to be the next greatest thing. And it's like, if they've never actually learned of like, they've achieved that level with never having to work towards it, and never having obstacle to overcome, that first, it's going to come. It's going to be an injury. It's going to be a hardship. It could be a mental thing, whatever it is. It's going to come. And if they don't have the confidence and the skills to know that they can push and drive through that and find that there must be a way to work their way out of, in your terms, the depths of hell, like it's going to completely sideswipe them and take that away from them. And because they're not going to know how to do this. And it's just, to me, such an ultra critical point to understand. I want to thank you for, bringing that up and, saying that's an important point, because it is incredibly valuable. Does it mean you got to do that with all things in your life at all times? Heck no. But it's something that you need to stay training. You need to stay training those other areas of, within your life to have the resilience to be able to take these things on, to achieve your goals and move forward and do what you want to do in life. So,
yeah. So needless to say, you said, I'm going to be all in order to get to where I want to go. I'm going to risk it all. And you did.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like all the chips were in, all of them. And by chips, I mean money. Just everything. Like, I knew that I was going to basically strip it down and throw it all in, and it worked. But like, I just, in my mind, it was not a big risk. From the outside looking in, it was a huge risk. And like I said, I was advised not to do that by many people. I know how hard it was going to be to get back into the game and all this stuff, which is hilarious, because not only am I back in the game, but I'm in a hitting coach position. So like, it's to me, the only risk, and this is so cliche, but the only risk is not taking risk. And the only risk is like not pushing yourself to the brink, because that's just going to make you, it's going to take away quality from your life.
How would you never know what you could possibly achieve if you don't throw it all in?
What's the risk of going the path and never having done that, and you're 80 years old and you're sitting there reflecting on your life, and you're going, and you got to explain to that 10-year-old girl in your head that said, I want to be the first female, that does this. And knowing that I had a decision at one point to do that, to at least try and take a swing at it. And I chose not to. What's that risk?
I often reflect on, like, if I died today, first of all, would I be okay with it? The answer is yes, 100%. If I died today, like, if for some reason, like, something happened, as I'm dying, I know I would think to myself, like, well, I did a pretty good job. Like, shit, this sucks. I thought I had more in me. But, like, I know my last thought would be like, well, I'm good. And I know, like, you have to think to yourself, like, what would people say at your funeral? And I know what they would say at mine. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't have any regrets. Like, my life has been amazing in every facet. It actually has little to do with career. Like, that, my life is amazing in many facets, and I don't have any regrets. And I'm 32, and I can say with my whole heart, I'm okay to die.
Please don't do that till after we've published this podcast. We're so fresh and great on the new news that you being with the Yankees and all, we don't want no more news like that.
Shoot.
And by the way, are you going to get a ticket to the winter meetings in a couple weeks in San Diego? Will you be down there?
I am going, yes.
Good. Well, you have to stop by and see us. We'll be down there
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. I will see you guys.
Showing off our wares there. Yeah.
Nice. Perfect.
Well, Brandon, we got to make some room for more questions for you, since.
Well, I think as we start to kind of run up on time, I think the message is you got to risk it for the biscuit, as they say.
That should be the title of the podcast.
Yes, a nice summary.
Mm-hmm.
Risk it for the biscuit.
Yep.
Okay.
Rachel, what's going to happen over the next few weeks for you? If you're in Seattle now, are you living in Seattle?
I'm in Seattle working at Driveline and full stop into a few projects. So you guys know about one that's going on with Kabuki Strength, testing out the Duffalo bar. So that's one thing we're working on. And then we've got a gaze tracking project that's really cool, that's never been done before, that we're working on, just basically tracking the gaze strategies of elite level decision makers, which means not just major league players, but the elite of the elite in the area of decision making at the plate. So basically they get a lot of walks, or they just they select the correct pitches to swing at. So if it's a strike, they swing, and if it's a ball, they leave it. So we're recruiting subjects for that study. It's never been done on live pitchers. It's never been done with elite level hitters like this. So we're really stoked about that project. And Driveline is so awesome to be able to get that done. And then also studying biomechanics of the pitching motion, hip loading strategies in the back leg, and how that affects like everything up the chain. So if the guy has a very anterior dominant loading strategy in his back leg, that can cause problems with timing of the pelvis and thorax, and also like shoulder and elbow kinetics. So that's another project that I'm working on personally, but there's a lot of stuff going on at Driveline. It's a really special place. So I'll be up here for the next couple months, and then to Tampa in February.
Great.
Awesome.
Will you spend most of the year in Tampa then, or do you know yet?
I will spend most of the year in Tampa, and I'll probably rove a little bit to the Dominican Republic and do some things there. So I will be the GCL hitting coach, and I'll be working in the lab there. So I'll have like a few different responsibilities, but mostly GCL hitting coach in Tampa.
Excellent.
Great.
Well,
hopefully we'll see you in Tampa too.
yeah, I was going to say.
Planning. We last year was the first time we've been going to Arizona for the last 3 years, but last year was the first time we got to Florida. It's a little easier to get around to all the teams in Phoenix. They're so close. We found out, Chris and I did, that we had to drive all over the state to make appointments. It wasn't quite as easy. In fact, we didn't get over to the East Coast. We were kind of centered around Tampa, but we'll get back down there and again. Hopefully get a chance to meet up with you and
Cool.
Matt Krause and the team down there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, as we're wrapping up, is there anything that you'd like to share as far as like where people can find you, reach out to you? It's not, that sort of thing. I know you already stated your, kind of mistaste for social media a little bit, the goods and the bads, but
the social media is there to provide an accessible, just to provide accessibility to me, and to also be visible for, frankly, for young women is what I typically think about when I'm putting stuff out. I think it's important to not just do the job, and not everyone feels this way, so it's okay, but I actually feel like a duty or a responsibility to be a visible idea and a role model for young women. And so it's great. Social media is awesome. There's really positive things to it, but also it can be just like anything else, used and abused. So but I'm very accessible on Instagram, Rachel.Balkovec. I'm on Twitter, which is Damsel in the Dugout is my handle. And then my website is rachelbalkovec.com. I mean, I don't know. You can find me pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. And your podcast again?
My podcast is the Theta Wave podcast, and the next one coming out is Nina she's a pioneer in BMX biking for women and has been in the sport for 20 plus years and is now trying to compete in the Olympics. So keep an eye out for that one whenever I have time to put it out.
Awesome. Well, absolutely. I can tell you, I absolutely loved our discussion today. So just fantastic. Thanks for coming on. And again, congratulations on, everything that you've done and accomplished so far. And I'm sure that it'll continue onward from here. So, yeah.
I'm gonna keep that GM thing in the back of my head too, because I know someday you'll be there.
Yeah, I've got a lot to learn. And I'm just excited. Like I have so many great things coming ahead with the Yankees, like just learning from them, and so I'm focused on that one, but definitely that's down the road, so keep an eye out.
All right,
we'll do it.
Brandon, you got anything else before we close up?
No, that was a really fun podcast. It definitely took a few different directions than I thought we would originally discuss, but I'm really happy that it did, and I want to echo these guys and say thank you for coming on and sharing everything that you have, and I think all of our listeners are definitely going to find great benefit in listening to this.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Excellent.
Great. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
I wish you well, Rachel.